think Jim already introduced him, but this is our Texas State Director of MADRC. He's been a big asset to us. He does a lot of audio research, and we're glad to have him up here with us. Always glad to have him around. So without further ado, this is Larry Gearman Parks.
Thanks, Darren and Jim and everybody for coming out today. This will be my first time to speak, so bear with me.
I got it.
What I put together with the little slideshow, it does have some audio in it, so I'm going to have to ask Darren, I may have to take this mic off and plug it into my computer. This thing. So we're going to lose the mic, right? No? Okay. So let me just go through this. Carl went through some of the electronic devices with audio research. And first off, I just want to say that audio research is an effective way of collecting biological evidence. It has a name, it's called bioacoustics, and it is considered a science, so it's not just playing around with electronics. Now, if you can see this picture there, that's our leader, Darren, with a parabolic dish from Legends of the Ozarks. Pulled that off the Travel Channel. It's going to be probably this thing. You can unplug that mouse. And of course, this is brought to you by Mid-America Bigfoot. In this field of research, game cameras historically have seemed rather ineffective with catching our target. Now, bear in mind, I wrote this before something that just happened recently. Darren will share later. But it's been mentioned earlier, game cameras seem like they're spotted by this creature on the trees. And you're going to have to, there's still got to try to use one, don't give up, but you're going to have to hide them and hide the infrared light. Just don't just put it on a tree and expect one to walk in front of it. But we'll get to that later on Darren's presentation. Now you're probably going to want to ask, why record something you may not get to see it if you're not using a camera with it? And I'll tell you one good reason. It's context. Why would you just want to tell a story of something that happened when you can rehearse the moment, captured live, with all the emotion and all the context of the whole situation? It really leaves a good impact. It's a lot of fun. It may not solve any mysteries. Sometimes you can record something that's never been recorded before. You can survey the wildlife in a given area. If you get into this field, you'll find out that you're going to find coyotes and barred owls and everything. It's going to be the most common recordings besides tree frogs and crickets. I will say, if you start to decide, get back a little bit. The best time to do audio research is in the winter. Here in the South, our winters are manageable. You can have some really nice, calm nights with no wind, and all the tree frogs, or at the pond, or the crickets, everything's gone down, and that's really the best time to get some really high quality audio. And you may record something you've never heard before. For those that haven't heard that, there's a CD, there's some recordings from the early 70s called the Sierra Sounds, and a man named Ron Moorhead and Alan Berry, they were interacting with some creatures in this high mountain, remote, private area in California, and they recorded what's been analyzed to be actually the voice of the creature speaking in its own language. I'll get more on that here in a little bit. R. Scott Nelson, as Jim mentioned earlier, he's a retired Navy cryptolinguist, 30 years experience, decoding from military and foreign language, analyzing, transcribing, everything that has to do with language and codes and different languages. And he's done some brilliant presentations on the subject the last couple of years, and he's got another book coming out. And he's the one that's come up And just a few years ago, this Sierra Sounds that was done like in '74, he had that shown to him, and he immediately recognized that it was a language. And he's gone in there and slowed it down and found out that it was at a speed twice that of what humans are capable and outside the range of a human's capabilities. So he's made the statement already that the sounds in that recording are not possibly created by human, and that it is a language. He actually separates out words. There are sentences and conversations back and forth between more than one creature. This is just some of what I was talking about. Now, if you go to the Mid-America Bigfoot's got a YouTube channel called Bigfoot Field Guide TV, and some of Scott Nelson's presentations are on there from previous conferences. I recommend it highly for him going over the Sierra Sounds. Also, when you're doing recordings, you can use software to put out a spectral image where you can see the wavelengths and frequencies and compare them to other known or other unknown recordings to look for patterns and see if they're in the same hertz range and so forth. Some of my friends have done a little more of this than myself. I usually just listen to the clips. I hadn't practiced that much on the spectral end of it yet. Of course, the first piece of equipment I think Carl showed you earlier is a digital voice recorder. You can get one for as cheap as $30. I bought one that was in the $50 range. It uses 2 AAA batteries, and it lasts much longer in the field. In the wintertime, particularly where you want to do the good recordings, if you only have a single AAA battery, your recorder might die in 7 or 8 hours. And I've gone 17 hours in the winter with mine. In the summertime, I actually pulled off a full 24-hour plus recording and just walked up to it to take it off after leaving it there overnight. That's just, you know, mine's an Olympus. There's several models. I think I went to Circuit City to get mine. What you see here is a drop box that my friends at Texel Research, they put together a lot of these. And what it is, it's the digital recorder tucked inside one of these boxes with a hole drilled and an external microphone plugged in underneath, so that it's basically rain protection, and you can hang it on a tree branch as high as you'd like. Sometimes use bait like peanut butter or something to put out a scent, and maybe wipe it on the tree trunk, or just the recorder by itself has been effective as well. But you can hang it 7 feet in the air, away from a tree trunk, whatever you like. But it's a real handy way to put out recorders and just go back and get them. And you see the contents of another box. There's the small handheld recorder. Which, by the way, you can research just with the recorder. I've gotten the habit of walking with that just in my hand. And I've done some rather good recordings just when I'm out field researching with my friends, just holding that recorder firmly in my hand. So if something happens while we're on a night hike, you can capture everything. So we need to come back and report in. Because a lot of times your research is at night and you're not going to be able to get the photographs or video anyway in the light conditions. So that's where audio really steps in at the night to give you something. Now here's an example. You can't see it, but this basically my first parabolic rig. It was a dish that I bought, and I had just rigged up an old broomstick and stuck it on a Christmas tree stand. It was kind of cheap, but it worked. And I took it out to a guy's property on the Sabine River, and he had a deer blind along this trail, and I just sat it on top of it, and actually slept in my truck across the train tracks that night. And when I got home and went over my overnight recording, I actually picked up something at 2 o'clock in the morning that sounded completely bipedal, walking towards the recorder, stopping like it saw it, and then it goes ahead and continues to walk right past it at 2 or 3 in the morning in a private property situation. I can only think that it's what we call a walk-up recording, where it doesn't sound like a four-legged animal like a deer, that actually may have had a Bigfoot see my equipment pause and then walk on past it onto the gravel, which was merely maybe 20 yards from my vehicle where I was asleep. So I thought that was pretty good. These are some of my guys that I work with, because I work a lot with Texel Research as well as Mid-America, and he's got one of his parabolic dishes with a night-shot Sony video camera attached on top with an infrared spotlight and a white light spotlight, along with his, he's got this electronic bionic ear device that can boost the microphone sensitivity, and he'll position that around. And this was in East Texas location, a lot of activity. So I thought that might be kind of applicable for this topic, to show that you can basically customize this rig as far as you like. You can add your video to go with your audio. I personally would like to create some kind of audio device that will trigger a video camera instead of something that I can just turn on a passive type of video that will just start running when a certain decibel or something hits. That's what I'd like to work towards getting. This is a little more on the walk-up recordings like I described earlier. It's really a lot of fun. Now, sometimes you'll get stuff, you'll just get rustling and movement, and you won't be able to determine whether or not it is something, you know, that is upright like we walk, but you just have to keep at it. Sometimes you get some that are very pronounced that sound bipedal. And I believe I got a clip on here, but Texel recorded a rather unique and very impressive recording deep on the Neches Rivers on a private property that was inaccessible. I mean, completely, just full of snakes and amphibious vehicles required to get this island down in the flood bottoms. And they put out a recorder and they put peanut butter on that tree 7 feet off the ground. And after I believe it was 2 o'clock in the morning, they had something walk up directly to it in the dark, straight to where the bait and recorder was, like it knew it was there. And as it was walking, you could hear it start coughing. It actually sounded like a person, but it had a deep rumbly cough like it was sick, and it actually proceeded to lick the peanut butter on the tree and then cough some more from licking the peanut butter. It's on their website. It's called a cough sequence. It's really something else. So I got some of it on here. I'm not sure how well it'll come through. We might turn the sound up. Less is flat out. So that was rather unique, and it's a good one. I'd recommend checking out. They have more longer versions of that. That's the shortened clip, because they have about 20 minutes. worth of recordings. Now, this is a term you should hear most of the time. And if you're out doing this for Bigfoot research, you're just going to have to use the term unidentified vocalization for most of it. If you can't pass it off as a common owl call or a coyote and you think it's a maybe, it's best to just call it an unidentified, because you may not know all the other animals very well, some of the fox sounds and other birds. But it's just a terminology, because you shouldn't make definitive statements absolutely without a little more information. But and just be careful. A lot of people claim, and I don't disbelieve it at all, but about Bigfoot mimicking other animal sounds, because I completely believe that. But if you pick up what sounds like a regular animal sound on audio, I don't know that you can claim that it's, oh, that's Bigfoot doing an owl. I mean, to me, that's reaching, unless, as I think Jim's mentioned, he's heard one animal call turn into a different kind of animal call midway.
We were at a spot up by Ulaga Lake, and we heard a pigeon turn into an owl halfway through the call.
Yeah, so that's a little harder to explain. And then I'm not sure if we were joking or if there was a cough at the end of a, maybe we were joking.
No, we've actually heard coughs.
Okay, well there you go. That would be a good time to have your recorder on, because some of the best stuff you'll ever experience is when you don't have your recorder with you. I can testify to that. That's the Bigfoot curse, the Bigfoot researcher curse. I was in Honabi a couple years ago camping out the day after everybody left from a big get-together, and turns out that night I awoke to some mumbling talk outside of my tent that just had my eyes bugged out of my head. I woke up to it, and of course I had planned on putting my recorder right by my tent because of that situation being possible. But instead, I had left it. I only had one recorder with me, and I decided to do my dish down the road, where we did catch a whoop that Jim did his manual whoop, and I recorded return whoop earlier in the evening. But I didn't bring my recorder back and set it by the tent when we turned in. So basically, I experienced something that I could only say what happened, and I didn't have any evidence. Although later, my friend Dave here, that I found on this the YouTube channel, Bigfoot Field Guide TV, 2 years earlier had an outing at the same location before I knew him, and he was describing the sounds around the tent at night in the same area, and he described this mumbling talk, and he did an imitation of it, and it was a year before I met him and 2 years before my incident, and he exactly replicated what I heard. So to me, that justified everything. But if I could do it over again, I would have had another recorder on. Which, by the way, when I stopped snoring when I woke up, it stopped. I heard it. It woke me up. It quit talking when I quit snoring, and I sat there in silence trying to listen, because I knew it wasn't more than maybe 10 feet away or less, and ended up thinking about bursting out the tent, but it would take so much noise to even move and unzip it. I just stayed there quiet, listening as hard as I could, and it was dead silent. And it was like a standoff of who was going to be quieter, it or me. And I ended up hearing it backpedal off and heard the rock shifting on the ground when it stepped back. So it reassured myself that there was something outside. Once again, no recorder. That's it. That should be louder than that, but let me do that again. This is a recording from 2009 that we did on the Trinity River, and I clipped out the part where we're talking before that because there's some audio on it. I was with a couple friends of mine, but we had been researching the same area on land just a week and a half earlier and heard a strange vocalization that was really quite loud and odd. It sounds sort of like a pig screaming, but it wasn't like regular hog sounds. Now granted, there are a lot of hogs in this location and coyotes, but also Bigfoot sightings. And that was a night that stuff happened to us and we didn't have any equipment. It was the first time we went to that spot together and just hung out. And we ended up hearing things around us. We heard wood knocks. We heard this strange scream at least 3 or 4 times in different directions. So it wasn't a one-off thing. It was the exact same pattern of a vocalization as we recorded later on the river, which was kind of on the river behind the land where we were at. But that night that we were there with no equipment, no recorder, our night ended after we heard sporadic movement and we had some kind of low rumbling growl coming at us that ran us off from behind the brush by us at midnight. So there ended up being basically what we call a Class B Bigfoot encounter. It wasn't a canine growl. It was a very low, just constant rumbling coming from a direction. And my buddy was an experienced researcher that had sightings, and he was very wound up and ready to get out of there. And I was just thinking, hey, that's cool. You hear that? Yeah. Oh, wow. And then he was ready to go. So I was like, okay, let's go. I would have probably stayed a few more minutes. Not sure how that would have worked out for us. Play it again here. Now see, to me it still sounds like a pig-like sound, but Texel's analyzed that, and we've had basically, it has like a little pause in it midway through it, and it was exactly the same when we heard it the week earlier. So it wasn't like a one-off thing. We were wondering if it was a pig being killed, or maybe it's a really giant hog that just does that, but it carries the note, and it had a spectral analysis that was similar to a female's human scream. And now, even just the other day, I was reading about a Michigan researcher describing Bigfoot activity in Michigan, and they were describing Bigfoot in this news article and described it having a pig-like scream. And I just thought that was interesting because that's the way I kind of describe this. Here, I'll get a few more other files. This is... Before I go back to the other one, that's the beginning. We actually had a recording that Texas recorded in Louisiana, and they've used it as a call blasting recording. And what we were doing was taking this Louisiana recording and call blasting it in my research area in the Trinity River I guess it was last May, in a campground. And it's adjacent to an area full of sightings. It's wildlife management and so forth. There's tens of thousands of acres there of uninhabitable wooded, flood areas full of snakes. Let me do that again. Basically what you're going to hear is the 2 call blasts, and then there's about a 30-second wait, and we start getting responses, and more than one creature responding. Now one of them, after a few responds, starts to sound more like a coyote, but one of the responders, they basically start going off at one another for 2 or 3 minutes, and one of them mimics the call exactly. So I feel like there's, I can't say 100%, but I feel like we do have Bigfoot responses from that call. a bit of fun, especially. But also, I didn't put it on here, but 45 minutes after we heard all the responses, and the close-up, the first two that were going back and forth to one another, were very close to it, to our north. And 45 minutes later, we were just standing around, just me and everybody else was asleep. We heard something. We don't know what we heard, but we heard the sound of movement. We're thinking, like as if I heard a deer ran through the woods near us. But there was a field across where we were at in this campsite. Well, it was a really odd sound. It sounded like a stampede, and we couldn't see anything, but there was enough starlight, and we were looking, and we're like, where's this sound coming from? It was moving from our left to our right, sweeping across, and it was just really bizarre. And it kind of spooked us a little bit, and didn't really know. He did hear one deer blow, while, maybe there were deer running through the woods. But when I went back and listened to the recording, when I pulled this recording off, right before the sound of all that movement, it's the sound of something that sounds like a gorilla grunt. That we didn't actually hear that when we just heard what followed it. But in that recording, you hear just a, but it was bellowy and deep, and it sounded like a gorilla. That's all I can say. From about 6 years ago, and it's in a location only maybe 5 or 10 miles away from where that last one was done. So I just wanted to play that. It's considered to be more on the likely, less like coyote or canine. Could be a Bigfoot howl. This is the Ohio that you hear on BFRO and on Finding Bigfoot. They'll call blast. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. It has a little tinny sound to it. Is that stuff? I don't like to use filtered recordings if I can help it, because it sounds metallic to me. It is a pretty effective call blasting method, and there are other people. You can use these recordings, by the way. Put them on your cell phone if you have a smartphone. Move the files. You can keep a bunch of them on your phone and play them for people you're interviewing, for witnesses or possible Bigfoot activity. I've played recordings on my phone and let them hear different styles, and they'll pick one out that stands out to them a lot. Now, it's worked a couple times already. I've started using that technique this year. I played that one for a witness on the Sabine River in East Texas, and that's, out of all the ones I played, that's the one he picked out to what he'd been hearing. So he's got some rather interesting tales. He thought he was being stalked by a cat, but once he described his story of this thing busting all the branches and screaming and running at him after all his feed being taken out of his deer feeder, and all these stories, I said, that's not a cat. It's stealing your deer feed. It chased you, broke branches, and screamed, and ran towards you, and almost directly to you, and stopped, and then went sideways through the branches. That was a Bigfoot. Described the classic bluff charge without ever studying the subject. So I knew I had a good spot to do some research.
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal, or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on, and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something looked like a man. I don't know what it was. Just it ran across the yard.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was. Whatever it is, it's running. I couldn't catch it if I was going to chase it. Or whatever it was that was standing out. I'm out here looking through the window now, and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff, Neil!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know. now.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right.
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, guy, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
And the guy is on foot.
I don't know what, he's a big, real big person. That's all I can say.
Okay, but it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person, somebody really big. But he's all in black.
Is he a black male or a white male? Did you actually see with it, or was he just wearing black?
He's all black and he's big. He is big.
So, many of you have probably heard that, but that's a very popular 911 call. It's a real 911 call. And you can tell the guy's pretty excited, and you can figure out the rest, that he was having an encounter live on the phone. So it's just another aspect to consider audio, not just for trying to record animal recordings. You can record your night hikes, you can record interviews with witnesses, you can play the sounds when you're interviewing someone, and also just consider that's, you know, it's still audio, it's, you know, even though it's a 911 call. So that's what we call a whoop. That's the original description of what a whoop call was. There are variations on the whoop that maybe an Oklahoma whoop might sound a little different, or that's just what we researchers are calling that, a whoop versus a howl versus a scream. But that's, when somebody says whoop, this is kind of the default whoop in the Bigfoot community. I will say, when I first started doing audio recording with my parabolic dish at the Trinity River, I picked out a recording. I just had it facing towards the river, and I picked up faintly, because of the distance, I heard something going off, and I actually, in my recording, I picked up a whoop exactly like that one, and that one was recorded in 1973 in Washington State. And here it was, you know, 2000, I guess it was 2009, 2010, that I recorded a little snippet of exact duplicate of it, along with some long howls and such that were going off that night. I just could only wish the recording was closer to my dish to be of better quality, but it wasn't. A lot of times you can only really review it in your microphone's headset in a quiet room and really pick out a lot of things. Not all of it's worthy of presentation in an outdoor setting like this, but it's still very personally fulfilling to do this stuff. Anyway, this happened last fall close to my house. We're listening to the headset. My buddy hears something. I stand up and hear it's watching us from the creek. I could play that again, but basically, my friend Mike was using a headset and handheld parabolic, and he was hearing something moving in the woods. It was getting my attention, whispering softly that it was that direction, just hardly 30 yards up the creek where the bend in the creek was from that corner in the woods. And I just happened to step up because I was sitting on the wood bridge. And the moment I stood up, whatever it was, I think it was already leaning against a tree or some dead branches, because it must have had its weight on it. And when I stood up, assuming it's watching us, because we've been there for hours, the limb gave out and broke, and it fell in the creek and splashed about. And then it stopped, and it never said a sound. And then after it paused, bipedal sound of it walking out of the creek. And granted, if I could do that over, I was kind of stunned at the moment. When we have stuff like that happen when we're recording, we've trained ourselves to get quiet so we don't distort the recording while it's going on because it'll just ruin it. But at the same time, you're freezing because you're in awe because there's possibly a Bigfoot 30 yards from me and it fell in the creek, and I'm a little freaked out at the moment, you can understand. But I even had my headlight thing on my forehead and didn't reach up to turn it on while it was happening. It's disappointing to me because, like Robert, I've heard them close to me multiple times, haven't had a good visual yet. I've had other people see one while they were with me. Still haven't got to have a good visual.
You're talking about Stillwell, aren't you?
Well, that too, yeah. And the previous, that winter deal where we had the nice whoops in the creek and everybody else looking at it, P-treeking at us, and I just couldn't quite make it out in the dark, and we could have just walked right to it, but we were kind of at a distance in our group. We'd heard it walk across the creek, and so once again, I could have turned my light on, I probably could have got my visual, but I was a little bit surprised, needless to say, of something making that much racket right up on us. But it was, and that, by the way, that night, it was warmer weather. I think it was last September. I did a recording there, and my recorder, that's when my recorder actually ran the entire 24 hours, and I came back. It took a long time to go through that audio, but that night, some other people showed up at that bridge in the middle of the night, like at 1 or 2 in the morning, probably been drinking beer and relieving themselves and whatnot and cutting up. Well, you could hear on the recording when the vehicle leaves, like when my vehicle left, then hours go by and you're hearing water splashing and normal wood sounds. When the other vehicle was approaching, because you could hear it creeping up, it's a dirt road to get to this location, this blocked off, washed out bridge. You could hear something on the recorder. I heard the sound of a grunt as the vehicle approached, almost like out of disgust or a warning that something was coming. But once again, I heard a primate sounding sound. It wasn't raccoon chatter. I heard kind of a little soft grunt as the vehicle approached. And then they were doing their thing for a couple minutes. Well, they hear some stuff. I don't know if they saw anything, but they got freaked out and ran off. They got scared by something. They were hearing, I don't know if it was cows or something else was howling, but they got scared and ran off. When the vehicle left, there was also a departing wood knock, and also with my own vehicle leaving, a small little wood knocks had been caught on that tape. So basically there was like warning and departures, approaching and departing vehicle sounds that could be Bigfoot warnings for something, humans approaching the territory. And had all of it that night. And I had some other miscellaneous sounds, all kinds of animals, hogs, and you just wouldn't believe it. It was just a really busy night. You wouldn't. Oh, and on top of that, I'm not a ghost hunter, but I found basically what's an EVP in that night too. At like 11 o'clock at night, dead silence, and I picked this up just going through on my headphones, and it sounds like a little girl's asking for her mommy. And I picked it up twice. I could set it twice. And then later on, I find out when I started digging around that location in 1977, there was an unsolved case of a little girl that was found drowned in the creek. There was possibly a murder, unsolved, unidentified, never identified the person, just a little girl died in that creek. And not saying it's anything, but I just found this weird recording, and then later found this information in the creek about a sad tragic event of a little girl the same age the voice sounds like. But I'll leave that for y'all. That's not my area of expertise. So, why is it doing that?
I think your laptop.
I had more. Hard to accept, but it's two guys interacting with two forest fellas that sound like Japanese samurais living in the California mountains in the early 70s. have to figure that one out. Also, thanks to my friends at Texel Research, because they've taught me a lot about audio research. It's one of their specialties. Besides also the hair sample they have that was mentioned earlier that did come from Oklahoma. And it is in the current DNA study with Dr. Kitchen as well. One of the confirmed samples. That's all I can say about it. They're under non-disclosure agreements on what they know until it's all released to the public. And then, of course, the most important thing to remember in your audio research and all your Bigfoot research is have fun.
No, as a matter of fact, there's a family of Sasquatches headed your way. Get in the car and lock the doors. They are pissed and hungry. They want the bacon and the hot dog.